Community Cop Assignment won't be joining us, but you're here, we're here. This is where truth and real talk occurs. So tell a foe, tell a friend that they can tune in at ManhattanNeighborhoodNetwork.org if they don't have access to Brooklyn Cable or Manhattan Cable. I was away for a while, so we once again like to thank our brother Mike for holding us down while we were gone. Of course, the program don't miss a beat with whoever's here. So we once again like to commend you on the excellent job that you did in getting this information out. I know, I think Red was supposed to be on last week, but...
well, brother, the scriptures say iron sharpen iron, so we've sharpened each other.
Yes, sir. But as is customary, let's go right to our historical piece. This is the anniversary of the Soweto uprising. Some people call it Soweto riots, where the youth took to the streets as a result of the oppressive messes of the apartheid government. Why don't you remind our viewing audience of this very significant event, which had national and international repercussions and attention, and drew a lot of criticism on the government, the apartheid government of South Africa.
Well, it's certainly anytime you fire on an innocent people, not in the commission of a crime, civil disobedience in the civilized world is accepted. So for 20,000 or more students refusing to go along with the racist white supremacist regime and their goals with respect to not only carrying ID cards, but also with respect to the language and not to adhere to their language. It was monumental to take that type of stand. And the level of consciousness, the black consciousness that the students showed was above and beyond the call in 1976 when this happened. So the brutal police department to open fire on students, these young people, these are 13, 14, 15-year-old children, to open a fire with fully automatic weapons only showed you just how devilish the Praetorian regime of a white minority-controlled government would exercise against again children who were not doing other than protesting, which they had the right to do.
And the youth ought to be commended for taking such a heroic stance against such an oppressive, brutal regime as the apartheid regime. It took a lot of heart. And, like I said, that particular incident is memorialized not only in South Africa, but in the memory of all of us who supported the toppling of the government of South Africa. So the courage that they, manifested on that particular day ought to always be remembered, and we thank you for that. We want to talk about a story that we talked about here on Community Cop a few months ago, just an update. The Florida police chief, was sentenced to 3 years for a plot to frame black people for crimes. Some of you may remember we talked about the Biscayne Police Department in Florida. And a whole lot of these police brutality incidents happen in Florida. I mean, so many police videos and assaults and shootings and, a whole lot of craziness is going on in Florida. But this was a particular police chief who ordered his officers to arrest innocent black people and just put crimes on them, even though they knew that these individuals were innocent. This particular chief was recently sentenced to 3 years in prison, and that's a step forward. And hopefully it'll discourage other officers from engaging in such criminality. Officers who participate in his illegal arrest and conviction of innocent individuals was Officer Asiano and Charles Damoth, who received 12 months, and Officer Revilo, who received 27 months in jail. So, that is definitely a step forward, and, good riddance to these individuals. There's a story that happened in a deputy sheriff that is making the press, which is outrageous, where a deputy sheriff forced a mother, or coerced with the threat of arrest, to perform a sexual act on her own child?
Well, let me just try to get this right and try to make some sense of it. Deputy Sheriff Shaderick Jones, in lieu of arrest, forced Aisha Todd, forced her to perform a sex act, oral sex, on her 1-year-old child. Now, he admitted that this was his fetish. This was a fantasy that he had to exercise. You know how far we have fallen. I mean, what would Malcolm say? What would Admiral Clayton Powell say? Or I mean, what? Oh my goodness! You know, we have heroes and sheroes among us that have done tremendous things in our community, and then we have these devils who have ate the king's meat to a point where now they do the king's bidding on their own. They're on automatic. This black man actually forced a black woman. What would Harriet Tubman say if you told her that there's a black man in America that had a badge and a gun and had the authority of that state in Louisiana, and he forced a black woman to go down on her 1-year-old son? This is disgraceful. I can't even tell you on air what he should get the prescription that should be written. I'll just say that the world's a better place without him. For him to do that with all the struggles, with what's going on in Florida, Oklahoma, Georgia, Texas, Florida, all these places, outright murders of our people, and he wants to satisfy a fetish. Now, his fetish wasn't strong enough to make him do that to a white woman. He had to do that to a black woman because he knows his place. So he's going to limit his fetish to whatever demons he wants to exercise. He's going to do them on a black person. So this sick individual, 3 years on the job, had the temerity. I mean, how sick can you be to make a black woman go down on her own 1-year-old son, and then you try to cover it up? You don't go to work the next day because you're trying to cover it up, and you force her in lieu of arrest. I mean, you don't get any lower than that. And to do something like that in these days and times of struggle, the long protracted struggle, we're fighting for justice all over the country, and for him to do something like that, there is no jail sentence where he possibly looking at 15 to 20 years. He can, if they press it as a first, a rape charge can carry that much, but there's no amount of time that he can serve that will be equitable with respect to do something like that.
And just as they have, when you deal with crimes and with district attorneys decide to charge defendants with, there's aggravated circumstances where the charge can be stepped up. I it's my opinion that when police officers abuse their authority to commit heinous crimes such as this, there should not only be the sexual abuse charge or the rape charge, whatever the district attorney decides to charge him with. This should be aggravated because he abused the authority that he has of the state. He abused the authority to intimidate this woman into arresting her and perhaps taking her child from her as a result of the arrest. He abused the authority that the people gives him. So there should be an additional charge when police officers, abuse their authority to the degree that he did in this particular instance. There was a recent report that stated in the last 25 years, there's been over 900 cases of a police abuse.
Yeah, I covered a lot of that a few weeks ago. Yeah.
And that's preposterous. These officers are abusing their position and the authority that the state gives them, their position to stop, question, and frisk, to summons, to arrest, and even to kill. They're abusing their authority, so there should be an additional charge when police officers engage in such heinous acts when they commit particular crimes, abusing their authority. I mean, this woman, she probably will never get over.
How
what
can she?
What she was forced
She
to do.
can't get over. Her
Exactly.
life is forever changed.
Right.
Only intervention by God Himself can heal her, because she know what she did and she knew under what conditions she did that. How can she look at her son in the proper way with that motherly love the same way from here on in? Every time she watch him is going to remind her of what she did. Every time she looks at him, every time he cries, that will be on her mind. And for him to ruin her life, possibly ruin the baby's life, and if the baby finds out that this happened, that's just more. That's why I'm saying the world's a better place without him. And to be that disgusting, to be that demonic, it just belies human comprehension. And this is coming from a black man, not a Ku Klux Klan, White Citizens Council, a white supremacist, somebody under the auspices of a Richard Spencer. This is coming from a black man who on his own did this. And I know he wouldn't dare do it to a white woman, because they might have dealt with him a whole nother way had he did it to a white woman. But it's just sick and disgraceful that a black man did that to a crying black woman.
All right, we'll keep our viewing audience abreast when the dust settles and he's finally, because he's going to get convicted. When he's convicted and sentenced, we'll update.
And maybe Bubba, T-Bone, Ray, or some of them cats in prison with him will bring justice to this matter.
I doubt if he gets a lot of sympathy when he reaches his final destination.
I hope they find out right away and they address the situation.
Okay, another story that I talked about a few months ago, Marion County Sheriff's Office in Oklahoma, in which 5 sheriff deputies beat an unarmed drug subject. You can watch, those of you who have access to my Facebook page, and see the actual video. The update on this particular case is, in spite of the fact that the brutal beating of this individual who surrendered to police officers, and now, our viewing audience have to understand, police officers have been instructed, since they have these video cameras, when they in apprehension of a suspect, to say, stop resisting. The officers beat this brother, like he was worse than an animal. And he yelled it to them, he put his hands up, he laid on the ground, never defended himself, never tried to block their shots, and they assaulted him. But the update on this is the last police officer who fought this case was recently found innocent, in spite of the fact that there was a video. And it's preposterous, and it just shows that, there's this, this jury system that we have is sometimes is not functioning. Many times it doesn't work. It doesn't function well. Police officers a lot of times get too often the benefit of the doubt, especially when you're talking about a white jury. The mere fact that this was a video and this officer's action is captured on video and the jury found him innocent, is definitely not justice. It's the other than justice. I don't know what's going to happen. These was civil rights charges brought against this particular officer, but it's only a commentary once again on the criminal justice system that we don't have in this country.
Well, certainly video footage is valuable, and for you to have a situation where you have it, you should be able to analytically go step by step and do a fact-finding expedition, and then wherever the facts lead, that's where you should go. Well, that's not what normally happens in footage that shows you disparaging actions taken by a police officer. Now, if the perpetrator is a civilian, obviously that footage will be used against him. When the footage is showing one or more police officers engaging in criminality, there's a reluctance by the mayor, the chief of the department, the district attorney's office, where they have Blue Lives Matter laws, even governors are guilty of protecting police officers. Now, it's bad enough that you have the benefit of the doubt without footage. But when the footage shows you're wrong, when the footage shows you that, well, whether it was Van Dyke in Chicago, or if the footage shows you Eric Garner here in New York, now you dismiss the footage and you go with something else. That's why whether it's Pantaleo or the other 7 officers involved, 6 officers and the sergeant, they are not even being disciplined at this time. And the police department intentionally kept Pantaleo from being charged for 5 years. So he just about got his 20 years in now, because he had about 14 or 15 at the time. So now he's just about time to retire anyway, regardless, which they plan to do. And this is all done under the auspices of a mayor that you all love. So just keep that in mind. This is done intentionally by a mayor you all love, and a mayor who said from the outset that this appeared to be improper from the outset. And in no time, once he saw the PBA backing those officers, he turned around, and once they turned his back on him one time, he then turned around and acquiesced to the PBA. So we have to just remember that video footage, if it can hurt you, will put you away for life. But if you're a police officer, they will do everything above board, under board, to protect the police officers. And that's rather apparent. District attorneys whose job is to prosecute criminals are even going along with this.
Right. And if for those who want to see that ticket, it's Officer Jesse Terrell. If you want to see it, it's on YouTube, and it's the former Marion County sheriff's where 5 officers assaulted this man while he lay prone. And as you stated, in spite of the fact that there's a video, just like with the Eric Garner case, he stated 11 times, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. His pleas was ignored, and the Staten Island District Attorney chose not to convict him. The Department of Justice chose not to prosecute him. The New York State Attorney General, in spite of the video, chose not to bring charges against him. So as you stated, many times videos and forensic evidence, DNA evidence is utilized when they want to utilize it, but when they don't like the results of science, they want to ignore it.
The white man believes in science when it's to his advantage, with his agenda. He dismisses science automatically if it goes against his agenda, which is white supremacy.
And it's funny that you talk about frame by frame, because even in the trial of this individual, the district attorney played the film slow motion to show that this man is not resisting, yet the officers are striking.
And just one point, since you mentioned it before we started the show, with the Central Park 7, not 5, 7, the science said those young men weren't a part of this situation. All 7 of them were not a part. That's what the science says.
No DNA?
No DNA in terms of body fluids. There was not even dirt. They even examined the dirt in their sneakers, under the soles of their sneakers, and they weren't even, they didn't even have that evidence. They had literally no evidence that led back to those 7 young men, yet they prosecuted them to the full extent of the law, and in that process coerced them, which is child's play for trained police officers, to trick 13 to 14, 15-year-old children on just how to confess, and not even confess on themselves, but to tell on other people a story that was repeated that they gave them, and they repeated it, ergo confession.
Right, and that you have individuals, even though 7 individuals ultimately was arrested, 5 for this particular rape, and this particular accused with raping this woman. As you stated, there was no hair transfer, there was no body fluids transferred, there was absolutely nothing, no blood. Officers who recovered the body said it was a bloody mess.
Right.
So they had no blood in their clothing.
Right, when they were caught, right.
So as you stated, when forensic evidence or DNA evidence or science can be utilized, they use it.
And to those, please correct anybody that tries to say the Central Park 5. It was 7. It was those 5, the young Latino who pleaded guilty because they told his parents he would receive a lighter sentence if he pled guilty. And then the other one, Briscoe, Michael Briscoe, that Automatics, attorney extraordinaire, was able to walk out of the front door innocent. So he walked out. The other person pled guilty, and then the 5 left. So they made a scenario dismissing the other 2 and created a narrative where it's just 5, but it was 7.
All right, now Hannah Payne, that's the white woman who fatally shot a black motorist who she claimed was involved in a vehicle accident, minor vehicle accident. She was just recently released on a $100,000 bail. And this is a woman who callously and maliciously took out a weapon and killed an innocent, non-threatening, unarmed individual, and she receives a $100,000 bail. Update our viewed on her story.
Yeah, she received a $100,000 bail, and it's written into her documentation that she will wear an ankle monitor, and she will not be allowed to come within a certain distance or what have you of the wife and things like that, but it makes absolutely no sense for a dangerous individual that went hunting over a fender bender. Here this brother was going through a diabetic shock at that time, so that little fender bender, he kept going for a mile. She tracked him as a hunter, tracked him for a mile, closed off his exit ability so he couldn't get out of the car, and then screamed on him and told him to get out of the car. His car couldn't move. She pinned him in, and when she kept screaming, "Get out the car! Get out the car! Get out the effing car! Get out the effing car!" When he got out of the car, she blew his brains out. And that's the type of individual that for $100,000 you let out just like that. She's dangerous. There's no reason in the world other than her 21-year-old white skin that she's allowed, because she killed a black man, is allowed to get bail for $100,000 after being shown to be that dangerous. And allegedly they took her weapon for the time being.
And there's no justification behind that whatsoever. The sympathy, and we always make a comparison on how white supremacy is even extended, or white skin privilege is even same thing, even extended to white criminals. And that's throughout the criminal justice system, and incarceration and sentencing, and incarceration, being arrested, and being bail, et cetera, et cetera. This white skin privilege is even extended to white criminals.
And she can't say she feared for her life. She hunted him down. She chased him, and then when he was sitting in the car, she told him, "Get out the effing car," 4 times. And when he finally got out of the car, she killed him on the spot. So is she going to say she was scared for her life?
Well, I imagine after she's consult with her attorneys, they will bring up some kind of fear factor as the mere presence.
A 62-year-old black man unarmed and a 21-year-old white hunter armed.
Oh, yeah. In the minds of a lot of white folks, when you have a black male and a white female,
he's the monster.
He's automatically the monster.
Yeah.
She automatically, even though she has a weapon, even though she pursued him, even though she trapped him in, even though she
demanded he get out of the car.
She's still going to articulate that he presented a threat to her.
Yeah. Well, they can do it.
Oh yes,
that's part of white power.
I really want to talk real quick. We want to divert to New York City politics. Mayor Bill de Blasio announced on May 16th that he has an intention to run for president. He's the 23rd Democratic candidate who announces his running. And after he announced that he was running for president, where do you think he went? He went to South Carolina, to the Black Belt. He met with Democratic Black Caucus. He met with black lawmakers, a group at the library in the capital of Columbia. He met with Mayor Stephen Benjamin at Columbia, who's a black mayor. And then he went to Tabernacle Deliverance Temple in Orangeburg, South Carolina. This is the mayor, and of course he brought his beautiful black wife with him.
Oh, yeah.
This is a mayor who at no end will disrespect the black electorate to make as if he's a friend of ours. He announced on the 16th that he was running for president, and on the 18th, he went right to the Black Belt in the South to try to fool and confuse our people into supporting him when he has given the black community in New York City no support whatsoever. We elected him, as you stated, twice. We gave him over 90% of our vote, and when you look at the commissioners that he've appointed to the highest, most funded commissioners in New York City, none of them black. When you look at the law enforcement agencies in the city, he has appointed one black commissioner. Homelessness is at an all-time high in New York City. Gentrification is at an all-time high. New York City school system is still the most segregated school system in the whole country. This is not a friend of ours, but he always looked for our community to support him when he wants to advance his political career in one shape or form. I thought it was ironic, but I expected for him to run to an African-American community and somewhere in this country to kickstart his campaign.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. He has white preachers that are on his payroll, Reverend Sharpton and others. So I wouldn't be surprised if they've already used their connections with Baptists and other and made calls down south so he can gain entry in major black churches down there. And he picked one of the blackest states in the South, South Carolina, to launch his campaign because he is viewed nationally as a friend to black people, but those black people need to know that all of his power positions, all his commissioners are white, especially in law enforcement. All throughout law enforcement, all the major law enforcement agencies under his purview are all white-led. And and people need to know that, and people need to know some of the most brutal shootings and killings have occurred over this last 7 years under him.
And we need to also remember that he was the one, under his administration, Bosch, the officer who murdered Amadou Diallo, got promoted under his administration.
That's right, Kenneth Bosch.
Kenneth Bosch got murdered. And we talked about on this program how the New York City Police Department and Bill de Blasio, when he ran, candidate Bill de Blasio as mayor when he ran, said he was against stop, question, and frisk, and that he was going to minimize the number of stop, question, and frisk police officers conducted. But now New York City Police Department is engaged in the most invasive form of stop, question, and frisk, which is DNA dragnet. They're illegally, without authority, because there's no law to stop them from doing it, taking DNA samples from hundreds and hundreds of African Americans. And that's, when we talk about the recent case when the brother was convicted of raping
Chanel Lewis.
It was as a result of this dragnet that Bill de Blasio's administration, NYPD under his administration, has begun, this NYPD DNA dragnet. But we want to talk about a case in Cleveland where a sister was assaulted while she was incarcerated. And, this is making the news as well.
Yeah, Cuyahoga County, in a Cuyahoga County jail in Cleveland, you had a situation where Chantel Glass was assaulted. What they did was she was in a chair in a room, and they handcuffed her and shackled her to the chair, and in that process, she was not resisting. At the point after they shackled her legs, she moved one leg. I think it was her right leg when you look at the video. Moved her right leg, and at that point, the supervisor, who was there with several other officers, the supervisor, whose name is Idris Fareed Clark, he's a supervisor, he punched her in the face, and then he started shooting her with a chemical agent. Her face and her chest was literally orange. He was shooting the chemical agent from 6 inches, and you have to be a minimum of 3 feet away to shoot that chemical agent, because it can go directly into your eyes at that rate and can actually cause blindness, or it can disrupt your vision permanently. Well, he did it from 6 inches, grabbed her head, put it right there to her face, and just was spraying it in her face. Like a savage wild beast, he was doing this, and he knows full well. He was even asked later, why did you shoot into her face and eyes from 6 inches away? He said she wouldn't stop moving. You've heard that before. The person wouldn't stop moving with Rodney King. When they said why, they was asked, Stacey Coons and these other officers was asked, why did you continuously beat Rodney King? They said he never stopped moving. He disobeyed their direct orders to stop moving. And this is with the nerve, this supervisor who's with other officers had the nerve to say that she wouldn't stop moving. I want somebody out there to take a white person.
Now, we talk about not literally.
Well, yeah, well, in your mind. In your
Just imagine,
mind.
just imagine.
And imagine, you take a white person, a white woman, snatch her by her hair, as y'all would say, her long, wavy hair, and then start spraying her in her face and see how still she can be while you spraying her with a chemical agent that's just all in her nose and her eyes and just disrupting all of her sensibilities, and she says, stand still. So that was his excuse. See, white people can tell other white people that because that's that automatic self-identification where you can justify your actions by saying she wouldn't stop moving. The end wouldn't stop moving. That's why I did it.
And, you know, some people, they just want to hear anything. You know,
In other words, every law enforcement person is trained to have a story ready. When you're asked, you have to have a story.
And, you know, there's another story that's making the rounds of a young man who was strapped to his chair and he was assaulted, you know, punched in the face about 6 or 7 times. You know, the brutality and the criminality that exists in the minds of far too many police officers. See, these cases should be the exception, not the rule.
Right.
You know, but with the advent of all these video cameras and these criminal facilities, body cameras on police officers and the car, we're seeing that police criminality, police abuse and assault, these it's rampant. You know, it's not the exception. It is the rule, and it happens far too often. All right, but this at this segment of the program, we have to open up our phone calls. First caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Yes, sir. Assalamu alaikum. Kareem from Harlem. How y'all brothers doing?
Hotep, brother.
I just want to commend you, brothers, compliment you, brothers, on winning the political awards for your show. I heard about that. And what I really want to say also is that I want to make this state. They're speaking about no obstruction of collusion. But if you look at what your president is doing, what do we call that, brother? He's proving that they colluded, they conspired together, and he's obstructing in your face. So our people need to wake up and see what time it is because these people keep doing the same thing. Second of all, tomorrow at 6 p.m. at City Hall, in the council chambers, they're having an election voting commission hearing, whereas people will be able to voice their opinions on the different election things that's going on in New York City and vote on it, and the commissioner is going to be there to deal with it. Lastly, the only thing that's going to stop white people from doing what they're doing to our people, brother, is for us to do the same thing back to them. Y'all brothers be blessed. May Allah bless y'all. Keep doing a great job. And thank you for my comment.
Right, thank you for your call, brother, as is always. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Would that be me?
Yes.
Oh, hi. Good afternoon. How are you, gentlemen? My name is Mike from New York City.
Okay.
I want to ask you something. You might want to like too much time. I'd really like to know your 2 cents on this. I heard there a few days ago, Detective Mike Sheehan died. When you think of Mike Sheehan, what are your thoughts? Did you respect him as a police officer? Did you think that he, for the most part, was dedicatedly and did his job? But he still have respect to disrespect. That's all I know.
Right. All right.
I'm happy.
All right. You know, Mike Sheehan played a role in the conviction of the 5 individuals that were convicted in
7.
Central Park. Well, it was the 5 people
That was convicted, yeah.
convicted. He played a role in that. So, you know, I can't speak about his whole career, but if you look at the videotape, I mean, it speaks for itself. I mean, Linda Fairstein, all of them should be remembered for the role that they played and you know, manipulating these kids to make statements that was adverse for prosecuting these 5 individuals, and you know, for the other individual, if he was involved in that particular case, the other guy, the Spanish brother who you said pleaded guilty, you know, so he has to be held accountable for the role that he played in those particular, you know, convictions. You know, so, you know, as it relates to the rest of his career, you know, I don't know about the rest of his career, but as it relates to the Central Park rape case, you know, he has to be held accountable.
Well, I'll just say this, and I agree with you. Mm-hmm. You know, you can only go about the information provided, but he maintained after the fact that they did proper police work. So that shows you something is wrong. because he maintained that him and his fellow detectives were doing the right thing. And it's pretty obvious now, it's safe to say in hindsight, that they wasn't. But he maintained that they did the right thing.
Right. And this, just like with all the cases that we talk about, when police officers have no justification for their brutality that they enact, and they just come up with any explanation. Anyone looking at the tape, any law enforcement, any detective, any investigator, any prosecutor looking at the tape of the interviews of these individuals will see that the police officers acted inappropriately. That's not even debatable. But he, prior to his death, he maintained that he did nothing wrong because,
right.
He's not being honest, and neither is Linda Fairstein. But next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Is that me?
Yes, sir.
I guess that's me. Y'all have a great program, and I'm calling because I'm just outraged of what happened with that so-called officer, what he did with that woman and the mother with the 1-year-old child.
Mm-hmm.
This is I've never heard anything so cruel and wicked. This is just getting worse and worse. And something like if I had my way, and one of my punishments would be is to surgically remove his penis. That would just be one of the things I would do, and let him live the rest of his life in misery. This is just, and like Brother Mike has said a little while ago, that the mother, what kind of impact this is going to have on her. She's going to need therapy for the rest of her life.
Right.
With every single day she's going to be thinking about this. And that boy that is one year of age, he might have memory of that, because I remember when I remember when I was an infant, because I tell my mother about it when I was around 8 or 9 years old, and every 4 or 5 years after that, I would keep telling her, and she would say, "How do you remember those things when you was an infant? You was in the crib." But so there's things that he might, when that child gets older, he might remember this. This is just absolutely wicked. I am so disgusted. So usually I don't call. I listen though, because I get
Yes,
nervous,
sir.
But when I heard this, I was just outraged. This is ridiculous, So
Yes,
I hope you and the listening audience have a great day with good health. At least with good health, because after this, how can one have a great day? This is just horrible,
Right.
And peace and blessings be upon you with the best of health.
Okay. Well,
Yes,
thank you,
sir.
brother.
And thank you so much for that call. And I hope, and I know you're right when you say, because I've heard people say they can remember things at 1 and 2 years old. I just hope in this particular case that he doesn't. But I know she's scarred for life.
Right.
That part I can, I'm pretty sure of. She's scarred for life. She might not have any more children because of that very fact. And how can she hold a man and cling to a man now after a black man treated her that way? It might ill affect her the rest of her life in so many ways that it's just disgusting that this happened at the hands of a black man in law enforcement. When she should feel safe around a black man with a gun and a shield, but yet he betrayed the trust of our community in doing that.
All right, next caller. Welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Great show.
Where you calling from? Where you calling?
Was your name Julius? The brother that's speaking.
Okay.
But anyway, Big Mike, you're speaking crystal clear. And you're not mad. You're just being clear. There's a difference.
Oh, I'm both.
I wanted to.
I'm both. I'm mad. I'm clear, but I'm mad.
Yeah, you are. You are. But you're being clear, and so people can hear you, and that's a good thing. And then you got the brother sitting there because he's calm. So
He's mad also.
I'm very upset. Go ahead,
I think
sister.
what I'm trying to say is, and if you could just, this is just my opinion. I don't know when Eric Gardner was murdered during the process of them murdering him. I don't know who it was that threw out the word chokehold, but it had to either be a cop, a lawyer, or something like that, because I'm sure, let me finish, I'm sure Eric Gardner's mother didn't come up with that word. And I think they purposely call it a chokehold because they know that no charges would be put on that officer saying that he did a chokehold because they supposedly are not. Because when you're so-called chokehold, you can't speak. If he said something 11 times, they say, no, he can't. When you being choked, there's no air going through the airway. So I think whether it was Sharpton or whatever had that called a chokehold, they knew that his behind would not go to jail by using that word. Had his mother just said, oh, they killing my son, they bum rushed, they got him on the floor, they got a pin down, had she used language like that, maybe his ass would go to jail. But see, they use a chokehold.
Got it.
You got it.
Got it. Here's what. Just remember, and you need to know as well as other people need to know.
Yes,
this is why 100 Blacks in law enforcement made it clear back when this first happened. Do not put all your eggs in one basket. We made it clear that that wasn't the only violation. Was the illegal chokehold? There was also positional asphyxiation, which was taking place, which disallows your diaphragm to expand. That's why you're not, as a law enforcement person, pounce on somebody and remain on them. So when you see knees in the chest, bodies on the chest and on the rib cage, it's not allowing the diaphragm to expand. And that's made clear in the patrol guide. And also anything that prevents air intake, anything that prevents blood circulation is a chokehold. So they're trying to claim there in that administrative hearing that they were applying a seatbelt maneuver. This is a chokehold. This is a seatbelt maneuver. They're claiming that the officer in question, Pantaleo, was doing a seatbelt maneuver. But you know yourself, if you look at the tape, which I'm sure you've seen, his hands were not over his rib cage going across his body in a slanted way. It was around his neck.
But sister, let's not excuse the district attorney's office. The district attorney doesn't decide to prosecute or not prosecute an individual based on what the community claims Eric Garner suffered. So if members of the community said it was a chokehold, the district attorney doesn't go on that. These officers were responsible for his death, whether they use a chokehold, seatbelt maneuver, karate chop, whatever they use, they were ultimately responsible for causing his death, and they should be held accountable, whatever you want to call it. So it's not the position that the community took, which caused the Staten Island District Attorney not to press charges against Eric Garner. They are complicit. You know, they have a relationship with the New York City Police Department. That's why they decided not to prosecute Eric Garner. The New York State Attorney General decided not to charge Eric Garner, not to prosecute him, not because Reverend Sharpton or anybody else called it a chokehold. They have a responsibility to prosecute this police officer, and they chose not to do it. All right, next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Brother Ray Ray, how you doing?
Hotep, Brother Ray Ray.
How you doing, Mike? How you doing, Brother Noel?
All right, right.
I want to remind the Community Cop family who missed the brilliant lecture by Sister Keisha at 103 Quincy. You will have the opportunity to listen to her for part 2.
That's
Not
right.
this Wednesday, but next Wednesday. So if you had something to do, please make your calendar.
What was
clear
it
for
about?
next
Quickly,
Wednesday.
what was it about?
White radical organizations. White radical organizations.
Wait a minute.
And what is in store for black folks in America?
Wait a minute, brother.
Written and stated by them. I repeat, written and stated and documented by them.
Brother Ray
so
Ray.
if you missed that one, we have another one coming up next Wednesday, 103 Quincy, corner of Franklin Avenue. Take the A train to Franklin, the C train to Franklin, and the A train to Fulton. Well, listen, I hope that officer, that black officer that did that diabolical, oh man, it's unbelievable, but I hope he's from Louisiana, right, Mike?
Yes.
So he should go to Angola. He should go to Angola State Penitentiary. But there's one of the important things I used to hear Amos talk about, how black folks
Professor
was the
Amos,
replica.
Dr. Amos Wilson.
Replica. Dr. Amos Wilson, author of Black on Black Violence, Blueprint for Black Power. We are the replica clone of white folks. And to do that diabolical stuff, you could just go into history and see all the diabolical stuff that the European has done to African people. And I believe that's true. We are clones of them. My other statement is that
Quickly.
Go ahead,
we
brother.
also have a pastor, Matthew Gibson,
That's
did
right.
the diabolical of raping his daughter. And this is a man of God.
Right.
Yes.
Police officer, he's a man of God.
All right. Yeah, I was,
He followed that freaky, crazy King James. He
Okay.
followed that stinking King James. And my last point,
all right, brother.
didn't the Gardner family pay off money too quick and not ask for an indictment of the officer that choked them?
Let me respond
Didn't
real
they take
quickly.
money quick?
Let me respond real quickly.
Thank you.
Noel always talks about the importance of being indicted, and then a rigorous prosecution, and then ultimately a conviction, and then a sentence. Well, they didn't wait for that. In most cases with black folks, they get, the city intentionally gives them hush money. That's their recompense, and then they don't prosecute the police officers in question. That's what normally happens, where that, let's say, in the case of what happened on Eastern Parkway with the Jewish family, they were able to get prosecutions and get the money after, and then sue the hospital as well as the city after the fact. So it's a whole different dynamic when you're dealing with white people. They get the money later, they get the justice right away, they get the prosecution, and that's what's unfortunate.
Right. And Brother Ray, before you hung up, I was going to ask you, because the president said that there's no white supremacist or nationalist group. So,
And I'm glad you said that real quickly, because Sister Keisha, her lecture was 100 years of lynching continued. So she's demonstrating in a clear fashion white supremacist organizations all over the country. She's naming them, giving you locations, where they're at, where they're training. She's talking about infiltrations in major law enforcement agencies all over the countries. The FBI has confirmed that they're infiltrating police departments all over the country. Keisha is laying it out. The names are so innumerable, she can't even name all the names. That's why we're doing the part 2. So she's also taking us on the road to Philadelphia on the 15th. She's going to be in Philadelphia at the vegetarian restaurant, Spirit Foods. She's going to lay it all out there in a big place. But she's doing it here in Bed-Stuy 2 Wednesdays from now. We'll announce it next week, but you need to be there, and you'll have to change the dynamics of your organization, because the old organizations are not going to be able to deal with what these white supremacists all over the country are doing.
all right. Next caller, what kind of community cop? Where you calling from? Okay, brother, I hear you, but you're not coming in that clear. Turn your TV
Turn
off.
TV in.
Okay, Brooklyn. I was going to say, Yaku Grafton.
Turn your
Turn your
TV
TV
off.
down.
Oh, I say, Yaku Grafton the devil, conquer the planet of the devil, and long live your TV show, Community Cop.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Somebody act like they very familiar with student enrollment. The Supreme Wisdom.
Yes,
Next caller,
sir.
welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
I'm calling from Brownsville, Brooklyn.
Okay,
Go.
another Brooklyn. Quick question or comment, brother?
Okay, yes. On Netflix, there's a great series on the Central Park case. It's called When You See Us.
Right.
This show was produced by a black woman.
Ava DuVernay.
Ava DuVernay, yes. And this is told from the boy's point of view. So
Really?
I recommend.
Is Ultimatic in it? Is Ultimatic in it?
No. Colin Moore's in it. And they mentioned this.
Did they
This
mention?
is-
Did they mention that all 4 attorneys, black attorneys, were all suspended?
No.
They didn't mention that.
No.
They didn't mention
No.
automatics. Did they mention Michael
No.
Briscoe? But the DVD
no.
is good. But the series is good.
No, a lot of people,
No,
a lot of people saying this.
my point of view is that every black
It's
child
theater.
wasn't fathered.
Let me-
No, it's
Go
on Netflix.
Go ahead, brother. Go ahead, brother.
But my point of view is that, especially episode 1, that every black child and their mother and father should watch it because they can learn how the cops trick these boys, and not only the boys, it tricked the parents too. Except for Yusuf Salam mother, she walked her 15-year-old son out of the precinct. Now, I just want to say this: that when I was 16 years old, I just turned 16 on August the 2nd, August the 3rd, during the summer. I got off work with my father, got off work with him during the summer. So I'm going to the barbershop. I'm feeling good.
Quickly,
I'm able to pay for
quickly.
my own haircut. 2 plainclothes walked up on me side to side and said, "We're taking you to the Brownsville housing precinct." So when they got there, they showed me about 5 newspapers saying that I'm the Brownsville robber. So I told them it wasn't me. I don't know what you're talking about. So a patrolman come up to me and said, "When we get you to the 73rd, we're gonna hang you by your balls." After that,
Right. Okay.
I stopped
Okay,
talking.
all right, brother,
I
yeah.
told them my name,
Right.
my address, and my age. They took me to the 73rd. Then they
Time
took
out,
me to the 79th. Then they took me to another precinct.
Brother, time
And
out.
finally, they took me back to the 73rd.
Yo,
and told-
producers, turn them down, producers. Brother, we can't go over your whole case. We got the point. We got the gist of your point that when you're young, you shouldn't speak anything. You should demand that your parents come to the precinct. You shouldn't answer any questions. So we got. I think that's the gist of your point, right?
Yes, you're right. Keep
Right.
your mouth shut.
Right. Okay. Excellent point. An excellent point. And a lot of people who speak very, nicely about the particular film said there was a lot of information. I haven't viewed it as of yet, but thank you for your call, brother. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Good evening, gentlemen. It's the Westchester teacher.
All right.
Okay, really quick. One, at the Schaumburg last week, they had a whole forum on the Brown versus Board, segregation. Have we come far? I made it clear, no, we haven't. And that the rate we're going, we won't until there's something done that we all collectively have to make changes. And we have to stand up and we have to get to 65 Court Street. Otherwise, they're going to keep bringing in people like Carranza with Dumb Blasio and making these changes. Number 2, there was a movie or documentary, African Americans, Many Rivers to Cross. Whether or not you agree or like Henry Louis Gates, that's not what it's about. It's about a history of African Americans that is not in the textbooks. And parents really need to sit down with their children and watch it because it's very poignant and it's very, very important that they understand the shoulders that they stand on.
Right.
And basically, I don't even remember the third point, but I just want to say good job on last week's show with you, Michael, and also happy Father's Day, gentlemen, because you are the rocks that we live by and live for.
Thank you, sister. Sister, before you hang on, let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Now, what do you attribute? They say that New York State has the most segregated school system in the entire country.
Yes,
New York State is supposed to be progressive, so-called liberal. What is the reason that 60 years or how many years it is after Brown versus Board of Ed that New York State, one of the most allegedly progressive states in the whole union, has the most segregated? What do you attribute that to?
I think that people are scared of us because we are intelligent, poignant, sophisticated, dignified, polished people. They do not want to allow us the time to really shine. So therefore, they're going to keep us back. And some of us let that happen. And they are too afraid to speak up. And they don't fight for their children. And they don't fight for their rights. Okay? So that's briefly how I feel about it.
Don't hang up. 10 seconds. Tell us what you think about that police officer in Louisiana, quickly.
Oh, my goodness. I come for him with a cleaver. That was disgusting. And that's very disheartening.
Right.
All right. Okay.
All right, have a good one.
All right.
There's a picture of
That's him. That's him. That's him right there.
Thank you for your phone call, sister.
Well, let's end this by just saying that good to have Noel back. By the way, it's just special to have your brother with you
Yes, sir.
doing this show, and I want to thank all y'all so much out there when you see us in the streets. The kind words, the handshakes, the hugs, the attaboys that we get is deeply appreciated. Black man, black woman, protect the black child. Accept your own and be yourself. And thank our brother Abdul Rahman Muhammad for coming on last week. Professor, great man, and just want to thank y'all for all that y'all do.
And on behalf of Community College, we'd like to thank our engineers, Sheila Berry, Veronica Kit, Nat Woods, our production staff. We'd like to thank you, our viewing audience. And, you know, this is just an hour that we can sit down and talk about some issues that you're not going to hear on CNN, you're not going to hear on ABC, CBS, or MSNBC. You know, from our perspective, we definitely appreciate the opportunity that we have to sit before you to talk about these issues, because the television is one of the most dangerous instruments that you have in your house if it's not properly utilized. So much misinformation is being projected to your children, so much the base values and inaccuracies about us historically, you know, as it relates to today, politically, there's so much confusion. So the 60 minutes that we have to sit with you and to chat with you and to talk about some issues,